him, you would be happy to know that your student loans for New Paltz have come in. And this is the college we were going to, State University of New York at New Paltz. Well, that didn't make any sense because he graduated from New Paltz already. So I actually asked it to be rephrased, and it said, you'll be happy to know your student loans have come in, you should visit New Paltz. So I told Eric about all this, and he was now a graduate student at SUNY Albany. Well, about a month and a half later, he walks into the house, he says, dude, you better sit down for this one. What's going on, man? He says, New Paltz called my mother. They were cleaning out the bursar's office, the financial office. There was a file cabinet up against the wall. It was one of the last things they had to remove. They pulled the file cabinet away from the wall. There's an envelope behind the file cabinet. Inside the envelope was a check made out to me, Eric, for $900, uncashed Stafford loan. And we needed about $879 to be able to pay our rent. So this was just like, wow. How did they, and then you start going through these loops in your mind like, okay, how could this possibly have been done? What started to happen was that I would have a stack of cassette tapes. I would get about a month behind a lot of times on my transcriptions of this. I would dictate my dreams, and I would dictate whatever words I heard. The words were basically like a wisdom teaching, talking to me and saying, you know, spiritual principles, spiritual growth, talking about this ascension, saying there's this amazing thing that's going to come in your future. The whole planet is going to be going through this shift into a golden age. But I would get behind, and I'd have these stacks of tapes. And I would sit down a month after I dictated it or whatever. I'd start transcribing, and it would describe what I was doing right before I sat down at the computer, over and over and over again. You may remember that back in the 90s there was this little toy called a Tamagotchi. This little orange plastic thing, and little teenage girls would have it on their belts. And it was like a little chicken, and you'd feed the chicken by hitting the button. And so I had just gotten back from the convenience store. I saw a little girl with one of these things on her belt playing with it. I get home, pop in the tape, start transcribing it. And in the dream I'm saying, I'm seeing this little girl with some strange orange toy on her belt. A couple years later, another really dramatic story was I had a girlfriend at the time, Sabrina, as I call her on the website, and she came in to the house and I was transcribing, and she says, I got this really great story. You're going to love this. You stop the tape. Okay, cool. I just met this guy at the ARE. This is the Edgar Cayce Institute. I was now living in Virginia Beach at the time because the Cayce readings had said it was a safety land, and I felt that was a trustworthy thing. Safe from earth changes or whatever. So she says, yeah, this guy just stopped in for one day. He's an old friend of mine, and he was telling me about this building where the top floor was built to look like a UFO. Little porthole windows you could look out. It was really neat. So I say, oh, that's cool. So then I go back and I hit play and I'm transcribing. I'm seeing a building with the top floor looking like a UFO. So I'm like, come over here. And hit play and took my headphones off, and we're just looking at each other like, you know, the hairs are standing up, right? It's, oh my God. So, long story short, I'm getting all these synchronicities all the time, and I'm saying this is world-class data, but do you think I want to go public about being an extraterrestrial communicator? Heck no. I'm working for $5.77 an hour in a developmental disability facility. The last thing I want to do is end up in the mental ward again, but as a patient, not as an employee. So I'm living this double life. By day I'm working, and at night I come home and I'm transcribing tapes. And these readings are coming through, and they're beautiful, amazing discourses on spiritual growth, enlightenment, consciousness, ascension. Whew. So finally the source, to make a long story short, tells me, you know, I finally had an out-of-body experience. And one of the things that you want to do when you go out of body, if you're a guy at least, is it's your desire body, it's your subconscious, so you want to have sex, right? So I tried to conjure up a partner. And then I would be standing there with my pants down, and then there'd be all these people standing around pointing at me laughing. And I was like, okay, well, you know, if I'm going to get humiliated this much, maybe sex isn't such a good idea in the out-of-body plane. But then it seemed like I found this one woman, and things started to go pretty well. And she took me back to her room, and I'm like, wow, now we're getting somewhere. But then she had a roommate in the room, this guy, and it's like the room is a mess. And so I start trying to convince them, hey, look, you know, I'm out of body. None of this is real. Watch this. And I took my hand and shook it and turned it into a bowling ball. And then detached it and rolled it down the hallway. And then when I do that, they just kind of like dissociate and they wouldn't look at me. And then if I'd stop trying to do stuff like that, they'd come back. But when I try to tell them I was out of body, they would like lose track of my talking. So I finally said, isn't there somebody who knows what the hell is going on around here? Right? And I turn around and there's this woman, and she's just looking at me with this incredibly serene face. And she's got gray hair and a purple dress. And she's standing there, and she's not saying anything, and I realize I'm paralyzed. I can't move. And I'm looking at her like, okay, what's going on? I can't move. And I keep waiting for something to happen, and I'm getting really freaked out, you know, because I'm paralyzed. She goes, you know you have to move, don't you? No. Well, I know you said something about Virginia Beach, and as soon as I said Virginia Beach, it was like I was free. And then this other woman comes out. I go down a hallway, and there's all these doors, and a door opens, and this woman comes out, and she says, you're from Bloomingtown. That means you're blooming, doesn't it? I lived in a town called Bloomington. So I'm like, all right, I guess I got to move to Virginia Beach. So it wasn't easy. I had $700, threw all my stuff in the car, drove down there, got a list from the ARE, Association for Research and Enlightenment, the Casey organization. And this guy who I'd connected with, Francis Sporer, the art director of the Venture Inward magazine, the Edgar Casey magazine, says, I have got to meet you as soon as you get here. And, okay. Because I told him I was doing these readings and stuff, right? And I walk in, he walks up to the door because I ended up renting a room from his friend who lived in the condo across the way from his. And he opens up the door and he looks at me and he goes, my God, it is unbelievable. It's me. Me? What are you talking about? He's like, you look exactly like Edgar Casey. Exactly. Oh, man. You know, I'd already had this experience before I left from New York, in which there happened to be the only Northeast ARE study group was just a few miles away from my house. This guy Skip Weatherford was running it. And he secretly, you know, we were having these study group meetings in public, and he didn't want me to tell them, but on the side we were doing these hypnosis sessions where he would hypnotize me and I would end up channeling, and I was reading his mind. I would answer questions that he would ask before he would ask them out loud. And at one point, apparently, he said, well, isn't it's so strange that you can do this? And apparently in the channel, I opened up my eyes and I looked at him and I said, it is by nature of the continuity of consciousness that I can do this. It freaked him out because my eyes are black, you know, they're just like, it didn't look right. But that was also strange because I had these two crystals I would use under my hands when I do the reading. I put my hands on the crystals, and exactly as I did, this bolt of energy comes out of the wall from a wire, like about this long. And then he said, as soon as I left after that day, all the power in the house went off for exactly 1 hour. So strange things were going on like that. And then one day he says, you got to come over to my house right now. Right now. No, I'm serious. Right now. Okay, fine. So I go over there and he's got this magazine, and there's a cutout in the middle of the magazine with a picture in it. And the picture is of a face, and the face looks exactly like my face. And he says, throws it down on the desk, says, who's that? I'm thinking, okay, well, I've never been published, I've never been in print, it's clearly my face. And then I'm thinking, okay, well, all right, it's got to be the ARE magazine because it's got that pencil style that they use on the cover. Edgar Casey. Yeah, but who else does it look like? Oh, man. So I'm just like, I do not want to be Edgar Casey. Okay. So then, but then I get this out of body